Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar focusing on leadership skills in teams. Today's webinar is entitled, Which Leadership Skill is Your Team Missing? The HR Certification Institute has pre-approved this webinar for one general recertification credit towards PHR, SPHR, GTHR recertification. To earn this credit, you must attend 90% of the webinar. Additionally, you must be logged in via your computer in order for the webinar to register you as an attendee. Please email us now if you have any trouble logging in via your computer and are instead joining by phone and wish to get HRCI credits. At the end of this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. In the survey, you can indicate if you wish to receive activity confirmation number to submit for HRCI recertification credits. Throughout the webinar today, you may type questions into the chat box, and we'll have 15 minutes at the end to answer questions, but I can also answer questions as we go if you submit via the chat box. I'll try to keep an eye on that. My name is Bernie Voss. My background is in industrial and organizational psychology, and I'm a talent solutions consultant here at Pinsight. Pinsight was founded 7 years ago by Martin Lanik, another industrial and organizational psychologist. We focus on live leadership simulations or virtual assessment centers. We work with companies usually to help them identify talent for mid-level or senior level positions. Our simulations are also used for development programs. You can see sample clients here on this slide. We're a global company and we deliver these simulations in multiple languages around the world. Here's the agenda for today's webinar. We'll be addressing 3 main points. First, I'll make the case that a lot of team problems really stem from missing leadership skills on a team. If just one member on the team has these leadership skills, a lot of the major team problems can be avoided. Second, we'll review some of the major team problems that have been identified by Lencioni and others. I'll also explain which team holes or missing leadership skills are affiliated with each major problem. My third point will focus on how to address some of these team holes by developing leadership habits. Turning these leadership skills into habits will ensure that crucial behaviors that prevent team problems are performed naturally and automatically by teammates. So Justin Sewell, author of Who Killed John F. Kennedy, said, "A few harmless flakes working together can unleash an avalanche of destruction." Today we'll be discussing how to pinpoint the differentiators of an avalanche of success or from an avalanche of destruction on your team. According to Gallup's State of the American Workplace report from this year, 84% of employees are matrix to some extent, meaning that they sometimes work on multiple teams with people who may or may not report to the same manager. So that's a lot of people working on teams these days, and people are working on different teams. I think I saw another statistic I believe it was, I can pull up the reference later, but it was 10% of executives in one study agreed about who was on a team. There's a lot of team dynamics going on these days, and a lot of companies have been using teams for a while, but there have been a lot of issues. Another study reported a number on what percent of teams don't work. So according to research, what percentage of teams don't work? And I'll bring up a poll here and we'll see what you think. Okay. So we've got a few people throwing in votes right now. Wait for a couple more. All right. Okay. All right, well, looks like everybody's putting the same answer, amazingly. Okay. All right, we've got a few more. All right. All right, thank you everyone for your response. I'll go ahead and post this now. Oh. Here we go. So as you can see, several people indicated that they thought it was 55%. A few people indicated 25%. Actually, the correct answer here is 75%. So according to research from the Harvard Business Review, about 75% of cross-functional teams fail to meet at least 3 of the following 5 criteria: meeting a planned budget, staying on schedule, adhering to specifications, and meeting customer expectations, and maintaining alignment with the company's corporate goals. That's pretty high, right? Since a lot of companies use teams and so many teams are dysfunctional, it's been important to focus attention on team problems. So what are the problems teams face? Many of you might be familiar with Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of Teams, that highlights the major areas where teams suffer. But these are just surface issues. Why is it that these problems arise? The problems commonly faced by teams often stem from a complete absence of a leadership skill. Think about it. If your team doesn't trust each other, they probably aren't using relationship building skills. Teammates can build relationships and trust by identifying common interests, values, hobbies, opinions, or experiences with other people on the team. They can offer and provide support for one another, really look for win-win opportunities, and find ways to reach mutual agreements. These are all key behaviors in building relationships. Relationship building skills are essential to building trust. I like to call these team holes in leadership skills. If at least someone on the team is exhibiting these leadership skills, then these holes are filled, and many common team problems are avoided. So when I refer to team holes, I mean that the leadership skill is not being exhibited. Teammates are not doing the behaviors affiliated with the leadership skill. Even if the team went to a training or development workshop, even if they actually have the leadership skill, they're not performing the behaviors. So what's the problem here? Oh. Sorry, I missed. I just realized that. Okay. Sorry about that. Here's my screen again. So this is where we were. This is Lencioni's pyramid, and this was displaying the team holes I was talking about. So first off, training only provides knowledge. The knowledge of how to do something and actually being able to do it are 2 different things. Training is like learning from lectures in a classroom. The learning is very passive. Development, on the other hand, is oriented towards behavior change and skill acquisition. Development is more hands-on. Now, even in an ideal world where a leader goes to an experiential skill development workshop and learns a new skill, doesn't mean they'll start using it on the job. This once-and-done type of skill development doesn't lend itself to actually using new skills on the job. Learners need to start practicing their skills on the job in order for development to be useful. So it's possible for team members to have a skill without using it on your team, but when no one on the team has a skill, or at least no one is using that skill, it leads to these team holes that create problems. There could be, and yeah. Ideally, we want to develop leaders to perform their skills on the job without putting in effort to do so. We want leaders to turn their skills into habits. The difference between skills and habits revolves primarily around the automaticity of the behavior. Skills are deliberate displays of behavior, whereas habits are more automatic. We can display these habits through a process known as, or we can develop these habits through a process known as overlearning in the cognitive psychology literature. Overlearning entails practicing a skill even after you've achieved mastery until using the skill actually becomes second nature. Think about driving a car. When you first started developing the skill, every action was deliberate and premeditated. You had to think about each and every behavior that goes into driving, using turn signals, switching lanes, pushing gas, shifting gears. After a while, the skills involved became automatic through repetition and practice to the point you can drive from point A to point B without ever consciously thinking about using turn signals, pressing the gas or brakes, etc. Automatic skills, in other words habits, are critical for us to be effective. With habits, we don't have to consciously think about it each time we wish to display the behavior. Our cognitive resources are finite, and in a complex work environment where most leaders operate in, it's critical to use those cognitive resources wisely. By automating a skill to the point at which it becomes a habit, we're freeing up cognitive resources to focus on other issues at hand. This also allows for the display of multiple complex behaviors at once, without any thought about this, while still being able to process other information in the environment. You're performing these skills, these habits, without thinking about it. Now we're moving our discussion on to help identify your team problems and which ones are actually affecting your teams and which leadership habit can resolve each of those team problems. We'll review common symptoms of common team problems and the corresponding team holes and leadership skills in this section. So the 5 main areas where teams fall apart are trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. We'll dive into each of these deeper and talk about some of the telltale signs that you've got a team hole leading to each of these types of issues. So are your teammates suspicious that others won't get their jobs done? Are they being passive-aggressive and leaving out key information that other teammates need? Are they hesitant to help one another? Maybe teammates are aggressively confrontational, leading to heated arguments that should be productive conversation. They just act hostile towards one another. As we mentioned earlier, all of the symptoms of how trust on a team point to a team hole where relationship building skills should be. Trust has been called the glue that holds teams together. When teammates work on developing relationship building habits, they start to lay the groundwork for seeing each other as valuable contributors that are on their side. Again, teammates can build relationships and trust by identifying common interests, values, hobbies, opinions, or experiences. Relationship building skills are essential to building trust. Your leaders can start to work on this by focusing on win-win opportunities when they're working with their teammates, looking for mutual agreements, and offering and providing support to one another. So what do you think some of the symptoms of team conflict look like? Go ahead and type some ideas into the chat box, and I'll read off some answers, and we'll see what we think. So somebody said different perceptions, and I think that was in the questions pane, misaligned values. If you could share this in the chat box, I'm not. That would be okay. So different perceptions, misaligned values. Yeah. So exactly. So some of the things that lead to this are miscommunications, frequent heated arguments, stubbornness, inflexibility, lack of coordination. Great. So some of the issues that rise to the surface will first probably be the communication issues. Maybe no one realized it was their responsibility to do something, or even two people completed the same task. So a lot of these are kind of symptoms of conflict, right? So what leadership skill do you think will be important to fill this kind of a team hole, this conflict? What leadership skill is important to resolve reduce miscommunication, enhance coordination between team members, and really help the team get on the same page. Well, it looks like I jumped ahead there. Sorry about that. So active listening skills. The right leadership habit to fill this team hole is active listening. Anytime people need to work something out or get on the same page, the only way that can happen is if they gain a thorough understanding of what the other is talking about by listening actively to what the other people are saying and feeling. It's crucial for teammates to understand each other. The team should work on raising open-ended questions, asking probing follow-up questions, restating what the other person has said to ensure that everyone is understanding each other. Even the FBI uses these techniques when they're negotiating hostage situations. It's crucial to understand exactly what the other party wants or needs in order to reach a mutually tenable solution. Teams can work together to improve good ideas or combine them if they're listening to each other. Have you ever been in a meeting where it's become the norm for the team to show up late or aren't present during the meeting? The effort that's being put in is clearly far below the capabilities of the team. When a team like this meets, people are likely thinking about what they're going to do as soon as it's adjourned instead of being present in the meeting. These teams suffer from disengagement, and you can see it as teammates bow their heads to their cell phones beneath the table for about half the meeting. People don't understand how their role contributes to the vision or why their role is important. The missing leadership habit here is selling the vision. If just one person on the team would illustrate a clear connection between the work at hand and the long-term vision, then others would be buying into it. Teammates would show up to meetings excited to discuss progress and coordinate their next objectives. Cell phones could even be left outside the room without complaints. Tying a vivid description of the future goal state to other teammates' personal values and needs will fill this team hole to the brim. So sell the vision to fix a disengaged team. So accountability. If people aren't showing up to meetings at all or missing deadlines because there's no accountability on the team, no one knows what they're responsible for, and the team isn't making any progress. What does the team need? The team needs to plan and organize work. Everyone needs to get on the same page, and someone or everyone needs to hold each team member accountable for what they're expected to deliver to the team. Teammates need to have a master plan. Who's going to do what? When are they going to do it by? What resources are you going to need to execute the plan, and how are you going to get those resources? These are all essential behaviors to planning and organizing work that if somebody on the team is really addressing these issues, the team can come together and start holding each other accountable. So this team hole can be filled with another leadership habit. Somebody regularly plans and organizes work, then the rest of the team will benefit and start seeing results. If everyone on the team develops this habit, then accountability will be a given. The last common team problem that has to do with individual teammates focusing on individual outcomes instead of group results. Teams that struggle with results often suffer to a mindset where members of the team ask themselves, what am I getting out of this, and how will my efforts meet my responsibilities? When members of the team are preoccupied with how to make the team's efforts serve themselves instead of asking how can I do this to best meet the objectives of the group, teams pull themselves apart. A vivid way to remember this idea is to think of the medieval method of execution, drawing and quartering. That's also called dismemberment. To avoid dismemberment and fill this team hole, someone needs to build the team spirit by planning activities to create unity on the team. Explicitly advocate for team cohesion and link the team's mission to the larger strategy of the company. You could try to propose new ways to meet the goals of the team and involve each team member to really develop this team spirit. And this is going to help you get your team more focused on group results instead of being focused on individual outcomes. So a team spirit can help you, building a team spirit can really help you develop those group results orientation on your teams. Here we have listed the 5 major leadership skills that need to be exercised on a regular basis to avoid major team problems like those displayed in Lencioni's pyramid. It would be careless of me not to note that the symptoms we reviewed here should be followed up with some sort of test to confirm or refute your hunch. For example, if you think your team needs to work on television because people are on their cell phones during a meeting, you'd have some sort of data to back up your hypothesis. Insight's live leadership simulations offer the gold standard of leadership skill assessment, so you can definitely tell where the soft spots are on your team. Now, we talked a lot about how to figure out which team hole you need to fill. Where do you go from there? If you've tested your hunch that your team needs the television more, where do you go from there? What's the best way to develop your team? As we mentioned earlier, we want to develop habits. We want to overlearn skills until we perform them without thinking, like a flight attendant helping passengers escape a burning plane. The best way to start developing habits is to keep the behaviors super simple. So what we're going to be talking about is breaking down competencies or leadership skills into micro behaviors. BJ Fogg, an expert on habits and one of Fortune's top 10 new gurus you should know, developed the Fogg behavior model to explain how people form habits. We learn a great deal from these principles in leadership development. So the idea is that we want to choose a micro behavior that requires very little motivation to do, something that you naturally want to do anyway, something that's aligned with your personality or your normal predisposition. It's also easy to do. So if it's easy to do, it's basically not going to require a whole lot of motivation to do each day. It's not going to be a difficult thing to perform. So what we want is to be landing in the success zone here. We want to have high motivation to do it. We want it to be easier to do. It can seem overwhelming for leaders to do all these behaviors at once. So we definitely recommend breaking down each competency into smaller exercises, as I mentioned just a moment ago. Focus on just a single aspect of this and start with daily practice of each behavior until you can create a habit. You can focus on the next micro behavior in the habit or in the competency. So this is cell division broken down into smaller micro behaviors. Once you break a competency down, like cell division, into smaller micro behaviors, it becomes more manageable. So cell division could be divided into appeal to your followers' personal values and needs, paint a concrete picture of the organization's future state, and communicate the vision in a concrete way that gets others excited. So there are 3 basic ingredients for building a habit. There's a cue, a behavior, and a reward. The cue is what triggers you to practice your behavior, and it's what triggers you to start practicing your new habit. Something that occurs ideally daily to remind you to practice. What we want to use are natural cues. We don't want to set a reminder on our cell phone. That would be an artificial cue, or a calendar reminder. That would be an artificial cue. The reason we want to make sure that we have natural cues are then we would essentially need cues to remind us to put things on our calendar, cues to remind us to put things in our phones. We need something that is more of a natural cue that occurs naturally in our everyday working environment. So cues that occur organically can trigger the behavior. For example, if you're trying to work on influencing others, you could start with developing a habit of setting an agenda at the beginning of every meeting. Break it down even further. First, you would have to think of an agenda items ahead of time. What are the most important issues that should be addressed in the meeting? Every day, take 5 minutes to write down the top 1 to 3 issues that should be addressed at your next meeting and set an agenda, set those as agenda topics. So a natural cue could be anything that gets you to schedule that meeting. Take 5 minutes to draft an agenda for that meeting. So after you sit down at your desk for work each day, you can start working on this new habit, whatever you decide it is. The micro behavior is the action you want to perform. So whether it's something in selling the vision, or in the example I just gave a moment ago, in influencing others, you select a micro behavior from that competency after you break it down. Now finally, the reward, this should be an intrinsic reward ideally. There can also be extrinsic rewards, but intrinsic rewards work much better. This is something that's naturally gratifying to you. If you align the behaviors, the micro behaviors you want to develop, and turn your habits with those, turn those into habits, try to make sure that those behaviors are aligned with your personality. For example, somebody that's extroverted, developing a skill to influence others will come more naturally than somebody who might be more introverted. As a result of aligning with the person's natural tendency to be around and influence others, this will be a skill that can be intrinsically rewarding to develop. Extrinsic rewards would be more like material rewards, praise from others, and this can be as simple as acknowledging a behavior, but these aren't as naturally motivating. This is something you might do just for self-enjoyment. For me, I like to play chess. I enjoy playing chess, so if I'm playing chess, it's naturally rewarding for me to develop that skill. And you need to, even if it's naturally rewarding, you need to practice and practice and practice and practice. Just like developing any skill, habits are kind of beyond skills, so we want to overlearn it. So anytime that you're working on a new musical piece, working on a new sport that you're learning, you have to practice and practice and practice until it becomes automatic. As you're fine-tuning your golf swing, for example, you may find that the things you're working on after your first golf lesson become automatic, and as you continue with your golf lessons, there's going to be more and more specific details about how to fine-tune your swing as you continue developing. So when do you move on to that next micro behavior? When you move on from one micro behavior to the next in the competency, like sell the vision? When are you going to move from appealing to your followers' values and needs onto the next one? On average, it takes about 66 days to develop a habit, and that's based on research. You'll know when it's a habit when it becomes a routine. You start doing it without even realizing it. You do it quickly and automatically. Essentially, there's no cognitive load on you when you're performing these skill behaviors, these micro behaviors. So one way to start looking at our leadership skills and our habits is we're looking at a concrete experience here that we offer at Insight. So what we do is we have trained assessors around the world who help assess each leader's skills, determine what they're capable of. What the goal is to create each of these skills into habits. We can look at competency details We record everything in the simulation, so after the simulation's over, we can give this kind of feedback and really see what each individual is capable of. There's also developmental suggestions. So this is kind of getting into how are you going to fill this team hole with your leadership habits, okay? So it's kind of our development suggestions are based on this 5 minutes a day philosophy. So if you're working on skill development, on your habit development for 5 minutes a day, you're going to be making a lot more progress towards your leadership habit development. Okay. So the best way to kind of develop these leadership habits and fill these team holes is to work on a daily basis and get continual feedback. So what we're working on at Pinsight is developing a live extended tracking system. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that this once and done type of activity isn't really the way to go to get this skill, to get this leadership competency to go from a skill to a habit. Okay. So what we're doing is we're including these prescriptive habits for leaders. We can identify which leadership skills or which habits need to be developed, and then they can work towards it each day and track their progress. So they can log on and see over here, here's something you can do after you start your computer. It takes 5 minutes to explore part of your organization or industry you know very little about. So after they see that, they'll be able to check mark that. They'll be able to check off that task, and that counts as credit for them working towards their developing these leadership habits. They can also take a picture. They can set daily reminders to help integrate this. They can also take a picture and upload it eventually, so they can get 3 more points, and our trained assessors will score their evidence that they are working towards their development. And then this improvement can be tracked over time. So leaders can work on these habits, these leadership habits, to fill these team holes, addressing issues that we've reviewed, like trust and conflict and commitment, accountability and results. And these habits, you can track the progress of these habits on your team and watch as these problems go away. In conclusion, the takeaway is that team problems often stem from team holes you need to fill with leadership habits. Break down your leadership competencies into micro behaviors and apply the habit building formula to develop leadership habits. So now I'd like to open up for questions. Okay. If you could type your questions into the chat, please, and instead of the, yeah. Okay, so here's a question. You mentioned looking for evidence before moving to fill team holes. Why? So everything at Pinsight is evidence-based and scientific. That's kind of our modus operandi. Many times we have a hunch about something we do, and we do a little investigating and learn that it's not quite how we thought. I like the 3 blind men in the elephant metaphor. So if one man might feel the trunk, the other feels the body, and the third feels the tail, if that's all they had to go with, then they could never agree on what an elephant was. Does that make sense? Are these the only 5 team holes that I need to focus on to build a great team? That's a great question. Today we covered the 5 most common and most discussed team holes. it's possible that other leadership skills are missing on your team that are leading to similar issues. This goes along with testing your hunches, actually. So that being said, building relationships, listening actively, selling the vision, planning and organizing work, and building team spirit, these are all foundational of building a great team. People on the team need to have these skills. So you definitely want to have these bases covered when on your team, or you'll run into a lot of these issues that Lencioni identified for us. But there could be other related skills that are missing. So that's why it's important to do a follow-up assessment. All right. Do we have any other questions right now? Okay. Okay. So if I put my team through a live virtual simulation, will it tell me what we should be working to develop? I've seen a few of your webinars before, and I think you mentioned that not everyone is right for development. What if no one on the team has the potential to develop the right leadership habit to fill the team hole? Okay, so depending on the size of the team, this could certainly be an issue. For instance, building team spirit is a difficult skill to develop, and we know this from empirical research. If no one on your team has this skill and their personality is not congruent with it, then it could become a difficult hole to fill. If this did occur, you should try to find somebody that, with the leadership habit, build team spirit, find somebody that already has this leadership habit and bring them onto the team, or at least bring somebody onto the team that has the potential to develop it. It'd be very important for the success of the team to assess potential new members to determine if they have the skill or the potential they need to help bring success to the team. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking about team holes and which leadership habits your team might be missing. I appreciate your questions and engagement, and I look forward to talking with you again next month. And there will be a short survey after the webinar if you would please fill that out. Thank you.